It is a tremendous honor to welcome Orni Petruschka to this podcast. He is the co-founder of an organization called Blue White Future based in Israel. How are you, Orni? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I'd like to begin by asking you about your background in the Israeli military as well as tech sector. So why don't you give us a short bio of where you work in those areas?
Okay, so I grew up in Israel near Tel Aviv, and then like every young Israeli, almost every young Israeli, I drafted to the military. I served as a fighter pilot for a few years. And when I got released, I studied engineering at the Technion and master's degree at Cornell University in the United States. And then I started my engineering career. And in 1993, I started a startup company with a partner, and then another one. Both companies were successfully acquired by large US conglomerates. And then in the early years of this millennium, I found myself with no worries of how to make a living, but many worries about the future of my country. So that's where I actually ended my professional career and started to work on issues related to the occupation, to democracy, and to the overall liberal future of Israel.
So just an aside, Technion, it's considered the MIT of Israel. So does the school live up to its reputation?
It is considered a very good school, a very good engineering school, and it's an honor to be there, and it's tough curriculum there, and especially in electrical engineering and computer sciences and also other very prestigious departments. So yes, it's a good school.
And of course, I'm always amazed at Israel's capacity to hold together. There's Jerusalem, which is the religious legacy of Israel, as well as the Old Testament, but it also has a very modern, thriving tech sector, which you are part of. So, as someone who was born and raised there, what is the secret sauce that holds together these two distinct elements?
Well, they are distinct. I think you're right about that. I mean, they're very distinct, and actually, some of the gaps in the Israeli society are a result of those two separate trends in Israeli, in the Israeli ethos and the Israeli society in general. So obviously Jerusalem is the hub of the Jewish religion, Jewish culture, and is very religious in its makeup. On one hand, there is somewhat spiritual, and many people are attracted to that because of its spirituality. And Tel Aviv is a bustling metropolitan area and also other areas in Israel are very modern, very techish in their orientation. And also, I must say that not only the good school of the Technion that you mentioned, but also the Israeli ethos, and part of it is the military. Okay, the fact that Israeli youngsters have to go to a military which is a demanding, disciplined, organization and framework. They get a lot of responsibility. They mature. They acquire skills of leadership, of teamwork, of responsibility, and that makes them also, in a way, that contributes to the Israeli very thriving high-tech sector. Because of those skills, be it in the technological units of the military or in other elite units of the military, where such responsibility is put upon very young people that are carefully selected and very meticulously also trained. So this helps also the high-tech sector and the prosperity, and as a result, the prosperity of those specific areas in Israel are a result of that. So you have those two, on one hand spiritual, on the other hand technical, modern, thriving economy, and they have to coexist, and this is also part of the problem in Israel, to some extent.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking from personal experience, what do you suppose are the biggest lessons that being in the Israeli Air Force has taught you?
So I just referred to that. It's the issues of it's the qualities of being responsible, being punctual, the teamwork, the leadership, all those specific attributes that are demanded from a young person are contribute later in this person's life. And this is something that the Air Force has given me and many others.
Mm-hmm. So before the foundation of the Blue White Future organization, did you have any political leanings?
Yeah, I grew up always thinking that the occupation of 3 million plus Palestinians is not good for Israel. It's almost tragic, in a sense, that Israel will not be able to be a democracy and home for the Jewish people at the same time, this is really the vision of Zionism, that Israel will be a democratic state on one hand and the home for the Jewish people on the other hand. And this combination cannot coexist with the occupation, because with the occupation, either when 3 million Palestinians have no rights, so we are not a democracy. If we keep those areas as part of Israel, or if we give just rights to everybody, we will not be the home of the Jewish people, because there will be parity between, or maybe majority of non-Jews in Israel. So we cannot keep those territories with the 3 million Palestinians in them and remain the democratic home of the Jewish people. So this is, in my sense, the end of Zionism, the end of this tremendous historic experiment that was made in bringing back Jews from all over the world to a small piece of land and establishing a state there. This will be the failure of this experiment. Okay, and to this day, we haven't ended the occupation, and therefore, I believe that we have this creation of Israel is still in danger.
So, could you give us a brief historical lesson on how Israel came to occupy the Palestinian territories to begin with?
Yes, sure. So Israel was established in 1948 in what has been called Palestine at the time, and even then, then it was just at the end of the Holocaust, end of the Second World War, after Jews started to assemble in Israel. There have been some strife between Jews and Arabs here, There have been some transfer, but at the end of the Second World War, after so many territories change hands and so many tragedies, and especially the tragedy of the Jewish people with the Holocaust, that has been deemed somehow acceptable, that Israel has been established in the 1948 borders, or 1949, after the armistice with the Arabs has taken place, 1949 borders. It did exact a toll on the Arabs who had, some of them had to many died in this independence war, and some of them had to relocate. But the 1949 borders were considered legitimate, okay, at the end of the Second World War. And Israel has, for 19 years, from 1948 to 1967, survived within those borders. And in 1967, there was what's called the Six-Day War, as a result of a threat of Egypt and Jordan and Syria to make war on Israel. And Israel has occupied the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, and most importantly, the West Bank and Gaza. So Israel has actually tripled its size in terms of territories in 1967. Since then, there have been the peace treaty with Egypt, in which the Sinai Peninsula was returned to Egypt. And there's been, in 2005, the disengagement from Gaza, from Gaza Strip. So right now, Israel still controls to this day, 56 years later, after 1967, we still control the West Bank, which is the area between the Jordan River and the main part of Israel. And that's the area where some 3 million Palestinians still reside. And this is there have been the Oslo Accords, in which the West Bank has been divided to 3 areas. Some are controlled by Palestinians. There are different security considerations in each of them, but in general, there's still control of Israel. Israel still controls definitely the West Bank, and also have some control over Gaza, because Gaza is a separate area, but that is controlled by Palestinians officially, but is surrounded by Israel in a way that it's some people call it the biggest ghetto in the world. It's a large piece of land in terms of but it is occupied by more than 1 million Palestinians only there. So in tremendous, it's very dense, and they have no exits, only to Israel and to the sea. So it's tough for them and so Israel controls all the exits and ins and outs of Gaza Strip. So this is also an issue. So all in all, it's a complex political situation in which Israel controls the West Bank and dominates the West Bank, and also the Gaza Strip to some extent.
So what are some of the challenges and difficulties standing in a way of stopping the occupation, to put it simply?
Okay. So people usually divide it in general to several causes that can be attributed to this issue. One is security considerations, but because the conflicts between Israel and the Palestinians have been with us for decades, for long days, people don't trust just ending the occupation, pulling back from those lands, and thinking that and assuming that peace will continue. Okay? Actually, they believe that the military control has to be maintained over those areas, regardless of the political situation. So this is one obstacle, is to actually to not only end the occupation, but also to form real and genuine peace with the Palestinians. So the security consideration is one. Second is the settlements. There are many settlements that Israel has put in the West Bank. Okay, so Israeli settlers live in the West Bank, some close to 500,000. Some of them, granted, are very close to the 1967, before the Six-Day War line. So even if we can still withdraw from most of the territories and keep those specific settlements and give freedom and statehood to the Palestinians, but not all of them. There are still maybe 100 or 150,000 settlers that live deep in the area of the West Bank. So this is another obstacle, and these are the most, let's say, the most zealot, the most idealistic settlers who going back to your first question about this duality in Israel between religion and modernization. Those are usually religious people that believe that this is the homeland of the Jewish people, and their ancestors lived there, and they want to live where their ancestors live. And again, this religious extremism leads them to live there. And Israel political system has no power, and I'd say no will sometimes to take it back and to force the withdrawal of those settlers. So this is another major obstacle from making Israel, from Israel withdrawing from the territories it occupied in 1967 in the West Bank.
So on the Jerusalem question, I believe the Oslo Accords also discuss the sovereignty of Jerusalem, and that sort of brought me to the difficult question of what is really the capital of Israel. Because growing up, and to put it in context, I grew up in Vietnam, so I believe that the government of Vietnam recognizes both the state of Israel and the state of Palestine. So I've always learned that the capital of Israel is Tel Aviv, but apparently there's a dispute between whether it's Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. And recently, during the Donald Trump administration, the Americans recognized Jerusalem as the capital, which was a very controversial move at the time. But in your view, what should be the designated sovereignty of Jerusalem?
Well, first of all, for Israelis, Jerusalem is the capital. This is for I'd say for all Israelis, including people like myself, who believe Israel should withdraw from the West Bank. Jerusalem is the capital. Now the question is, what exactly is Jerusalem, and how Jerusalem or how sovereignty in Jerusalem is divided between West Jerusalem, which is what I believe should be the Israeli capital, or is the Israeli capital, and East Jerusalem, the Arab neighborhoods of Jerusalem, okay, where that are mostly populated with Palestinians. That for me is not Israel, and it's for the Palestinians to decide if they want this to be their capital. Then Israel should recognize that East Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine. But that's not for me to decide. I mean, I don't think that Israel should occupy East Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. Now there is one issue that is still very sensitive, and this is Old Jerusalem, the holy sites, the area where the holy sites are located, the Western Wall, and what's called Haram al-Sharif, the Temple Mount, and these areas there should be a solution that maintains the religious status quo. It's a very, very small area. It's like the Vatican, something very, it's a religious place, and the status quo of administering this place should be maintained. The Palestinians, the Arabs should administer the mosques on Temple Mount, which are the places holy to Islam, and also the Christian church that is in the old city, and the Jews should administer the area of the Western Wall, which is holy to the the religious Jews, and the entire area should have no sovereignty or God's sovereignty or international sovereignty, whatever you want to call it. Okay, but this small area where all the religious sites are located has to have a specific solution of its own. Okay, and then and back again, West Jerusalem, the Israeli capital, East Jerusalem, the Palestinian capital, and a special solution for the religious sites.
And that brings me back to how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is framed to begin with. Well, some would say that it is a conflict between the two religions, Judaism and Islam, but others who say that it's a particularly modern conflict that begins in the 19th century with the Zionist movement and the creation of the State of Israel. So it is a very modern land dispute. So how should we frame this particular conflict?
It's both, obviously. It's both. The reason Jews came to Palestine at the time was because of their religious linkage, the historical and religious linkage to this area. On one hand, on the other hand, there are security, territorial issues. I mean, the many very, as I said, modern kind of disputes that are unrelated to religion. So obviously, it is both religious and modern conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So this year marks the 75th anniversary of Israel's founding. You mentioned that is 1948.
Right.
And I've had numerous conversations with Jewish people, both of Israeli descent and American, about this momentous occasion. And I've concluded that it's a rather bittersweet occasion because Israel has stood for 75 years, has developed and thrived and become arguably a force for good in the world. But at the same time, we're witnessing political turmoil. Before we get to the part about the political turmoil, tell us about your reflections on this momentous occasion.
Well, 75 years is a long time, but for me it is that's my home. I'm not I'll try and make it as best I can as the place that is worthy to be the home of all its citizens. Jews and Arabs a lot. We have of course within Israel we have an Arab minority of 20%. Who for 75 years struggling to find their own place in a state that is defined as the Jewish home of the home of the Jewish people, and they are Arabs, so they're not Jewish, and so how it can be, is it their home as well or not? So there have been some many issues that are unrelated to the political turmoil of the last year, that have been with us for many years. Aside from the occupation, some of them are connected to the occupation, but not like the Jewish-Arab relations within Israel. It is connected to the occupation to some extent, because the Arab citizens of Israel are also Palestinians. I mean, and the Palestinian brethren beyond the 67 who live in the territories are sometimes the same, sometimes are relatives, okay, and sometimes and of course they are all Palestinians, are the same people, but they have different status. Okay? So for Israel had many unique challenges, I'd say, not all of them. And that's on top of the challenges that every country has because of its history and its background. So I think that for Israel had some conflicts. It had to defend itself. Sometimes it had been too aggressive to my taste. In the name of keeping its own security. And it had challenges that are, let's say, unique. But on the other hand, it also got to tremendous achievements. If you consider that this country started from nothing and people weren't here, and all of its in a few generations, it has become a country that contributed to the world also scientifically and technologically in a profound and important way. It's also again there's duality here. On one hand, you have the good and contributing Israel that has contributed to humanity. And on the other hand, you have the Israel that suffers the internal struggles and strifes and issues that it has to get to overcome, and we haven't done that yet. So this is a dual face that we all that we can present all the time. Or we are presenting.
To me, I think Israel, in its 75 years, may be younger, so to speak, than many other states, but it's rare that a state was founded as a liberal democracy and for its entire existence has remained so. Of course, discounting the problems that we've discussed, it's still, in my view, a liberal democracy. There are certain countries that have existed longer, but did not start out as a liberal democracy, whereas other countries which are liberal democracies lost it, as in the examples of France or Germany. So that brings me to my next question, which is, to what extent is Israel's status as a liberal democracy being endangered?
I believe it is in danger. I believe that the tension between the different parts of society created a situation. First of all, Israel has always been fragile, liberal democracy. It is. I agree. It has been a liberal democracy from day one. From its establishment, but it's always been fragile. We have no constitution. We have no two houses of parliament. We have no federal system. We're not a member of the EU or any larger alliance that has proper mechanism to enforce this liberal democracy in Israel. We have a divided society. Some of it is very religious, some of it is very secular. So we've been a fragile liberal democracy for many years. And the only check that we had on the absolute power of the government is the Supreme Court, is the Israel judicial system. This has been the only check and balance that we have and it had functioned well until now. But recently, when the current government took office in late 2022, then it announced its plans to limit the judiciary in a very extreme way. And since the judiciary is the only check on the government power, it would, if those plans are carried out, then the government will have absolute power. And that is no longer a liberal democracy, that is in a way a dictatorship. So that's why the Israeli society has risen and is doing, has gotten into a massive protest that has been unprecedented in Israel's history.
Yeah, so my understanding is that Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the current prime minister of Israel, has officially become the longest-serving prime minister in the country's history, surpassing your first, David Ben-Gurion. And he has, his second stint in that office started in 2009 and has been nearly continuous since. There's a gap, I think in 2021, 2022, when he was elected out of office. But in his tenure, starting in 2009, he has seen 3 American presidents. So what makes him, play this Supreme Court judicial reform now instead of, all the previous years?
I think now in the last elections, the right-wing bloc that is composed of the religious parties, the ultra-religious and the ultra-nationalists, and the Likud party, which is the right-wing party that Netanyahu leads, got majority in parliament, and they formed a coalition that is a purely right-wing nationalist religious coalition. It's the first time they could do that, okay, or they did that. I mean, maybe they could do it before, but it's the first time it happened in such a clear victory, and that has enabled them to try and acquire also other strongholds in the Israeli administration, and most importantly, the judicial system. Try and change it in a way that will give the executive branch more power. And that is in order for them to carry out their ultra-nationalist agenda of the occupation, of the settlements, of giving more in the public life, the religion in general will have more visibility in public life, because, as you said, Israel is a combination of on one hand religious, on the other hand secular, technological, modern society. So give more weight to the religious part, to the part that in my mind takes us backward rather than forward. So they, and the only obstacle they have until now, or the main obstacle, is the judicial system that is making sure that the democratic and liberal values will remain the values that dictate public life in Israel. And because the judicial system is in the way of the coalition to exercise what they plan to do, they want to limit the judicial system and in a way, make it less potent than it has been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think I'd like to hear you explain, I guess, the Israeli Supreme Court to those who are outside of the country. So how does it function, and what are some of these reforms? How are some of these reforms are changing the court's nature?
Okay, so the Supreme Court is the court that we have like 3 levels of courts, and the Supreme Court is the highest. And the most constitutional issues come to the Supreme Court, and there is the way that judges are selected to the Supreme Court is through a committee, a special committee that has a balance of politicians from coalitions, a few from coalition and one from opposition. There's some judges themselves are part of this committee. They're like the representation of judges, representation of the Israeli Bar Association. So it's a mixed kind of committee, and there are specific guidelines that guide the way those the nominations are made to the Supreme Court. The president of the Supreme Court is elected by is nominated, not elected, by seniority. No, the longest serving judge on the panel becomes the president of the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court can it can cancel laws that the Knesset, our parliament, is putting out, and if it deems them unconstitutional, and this is something that has been done a few times in the past, not many times. I think since it started in the 1990s, it happened maybe 22 times, something like that. So less than once a year. Did the Supreme Court decide to cancel a law of the Knesset because it deemed it unconstitutional? So this is the Supreme Court. On the other hand, I also want to say that because we have no constitution, we have no the Knesset, the parliament, can enact any law it wants in a simple majority, and it can also call it a basic law. Basic law is a law that could become part of a constitution once we have one. Okay? It's a basic law is a law that carries more weight than a regular law. Okay? So the way usually the Supreme Court cancels regular laws is it bases them on principles that are enacted in basic laws. So this is something that because we have no constitution, the Supreme Court is in a very delicate situation when it comes to override or to cancel laws that are enacted by the parliament, by the Knesset.
Mm-hmm. I think the closest analogy I can think of is the American Supreme Court. The justices are selected by elected officials, i.e., the president, and confirmed by the Senate. But other than that, the Supreme Court is likely the least democratic part of the U.S. Democratic system, and I think. I suppose from your view, for the Israeli Supreme Court to function, it has to an extent be minimally democratic in that the judges are selected and rather than elected, and that's are independent from the parliament here, right?
Yeah, I think that's the point. It has to be apolitical. It has to, okay. We in the States, I just mentioned before, that in Israel we have no constitution. In the state they have a constitution. In Israel we have no two houses of parliament. In the States they have the Congress and the Senate. They have two houses of parliament. In Israel we have no federal systems. No, the U.S. is a federal system. They have 50 states, and most of the disputes are handled within the states, and few just come to the federal system. So it's very, very different system. And you're right. And even today in the U.S. there are a lot of criticism that the Supreme Court is too political. In Israel, we cannot afford having so the U.S. maybe because they have the Constitution, they have two houses of parliament, and they have a federal system, they can afford having a somewhat political Supreme Court and still be a democracy. Okay, in Israel we don't have all those protections. Okay, from the executive branch. The president in the U.S. cannot decide that he changes, say the election system. He cannot do that. In Israel, if the executive branch, if Netanyahu decides that there be no elections every 4 years, but every 10 years, or no elections at all, or whatever, and the parliament, because it's his coalition, will approve it, and if the court cannot cancel it, then we have no democracy anymore, because it's the only thing that stands between the executive branch and absolute power is the court in Israel, unlike the US.
Mhm.
So we have to make sure that the election of judges to the Supreme Court, justices to the Supreme Court, is apolitical. And this committee that is put that we have there, and the guidelines that guide the work of the committee, has proved very useful and very effective in maintaining the apolitical nature of the court, and therefore it's important that these will not be tampered with.
Right. Let me make the argument for the opposition, so to speak. I think Netanyahu has said repeatedly that this what he's doing is actually advancing democracy, because it enables parliament, which is an elected body of representatives, to select the Supreme Court justices, and therefore the Supreme Court justices are more or less answerable to the people, or at least the majority, and therefore is more democratic. Why do you think he's off the mark here?
Because democracy is not only the rule of the majority. Democracy also is protection of minority, and giving and having human rights and individual rights, and the majority cannot enforce everything on minorities. I just gave you the example. If the majority decides with 64 votes that they have out of the 120 in the Israeli parliament, with the majority they have, there won't be elections in 2026 when they are supposed to take place, but they're going to delay them to 2030 or whatever. How can this is the majority view. So what's wrong with that? That's democracy. They can tamper with democracy itself if there's only one branch. In democracy, there should be three distinct branches of government. And in Israel, in fact, we have only two, because the parliament, with the coalition and the absence of bicameral, of two houses of parliament, is in a way just doing what the executive branch is an extension of the executive branch. So that also does the legislation. So if we are doing away with the balance of the judicial system of the one branch that is independent of the executive branch, then we are no longer a democracy. So that's why I think what Netanyahu says is false.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that brings us to the liberal part of liberal democracy. As far as I can understand it, democracy means that the majority can decide on important decisions regarding the functioning of a state. But liberalism says that there are certain limits to that particular majoritarianism. For example, in the US, if say 51% of Americans decide to abolish the US Constitution, then that 51% cannot get what they want, because the Constitution is sacrosanct, so to speak. And
right.
I suppose it goes in the same way with the Israeli Constitution and the Israeli Supreme Court. But nevertheless, I think the decision for Netanyahu to reform the Supreme Court, or quote unquote reform, it is itself a pretty technical solution, but it did spark a massive wave of protest that is still ongoing up to this point. So my hunch is that there's a lot more that goes on in the minds of the protesters, and not all of them are deeply tuned into what the Israeli Supreme Court is. So, what do you suppose are some of the objectives and values, so to speak, that spark these protests?
First, I'd say that I think those technical issues that are related to the judiciary in Israel indeed are can be presented as technical, but we've seen what happened in Hungary and Poland regarding such technical, quote unquote, corrections of the judiciary, and how they lost their own sense of liberal democracy. And so at first, I think it was the tampering of the fact that the judiciary has been tampered with as the only check. But then I agree with you 100% that other issues came into play. The fact is this coalition is made up of religious extremists, and most protesters are not religious extremists, and they don't want religion to take a major role in public life in Israel, and they don't want, and they want to continue with their own liberal way of life. So this is one issue, one important issue that affects many of the protesters, is that they want that the Israeli public life will remain secular, will remain free, will remain with the liberties that we've been accustomed to. So this is one. A second issue is the way you treat minorities, the way you treat women, the way you treat LGBTQ, the way you treat the Arab minority. There are other ethnic minorities, refugees. There have been other issues that this current right-wing government wanted one way, and the protesters believe totally differently. The issue of the occupation also, to some extent, has been raised, but not to the fullest extent. No, these are not demonstrations about the occupation. I have to make it clear. These are demonstrations about other issues. Okay, but also you see there the connection, because occupation has been with us for so many years and is affecting the political discourse so profoundly. That it also found a place in the protest to some extent. Not all protesters identify with that. Okay, but some do. So there's been plethora of issues that have been discussed, been raised in the protests, but in a sense, they're all connected to the judicial system, because the judicial system is what affects, what protects the liberal way of life, and all those issues that I mentioned are manifestations of liberal way of life. Okay, those issues are deeply connected.
Mm-hmm. And I think that brings us to the question of the Haredi population in Israel. As you've alluded to earlier, you were one of the many young Israelis who were drafted into the military. The ones who were exempted from that draft, more likely Haredis, due to religious reasons. And because of this particular exemption, I believe their integration into, I guess, the larger Israeli public and political life were hindered. And I think to this day, the Haredi community is almost completely removed from the larger Israeli society. And one thing I noticed about anti-liberal populism, for the most part, coming from the right, is that these leaders claim to speak for the forgotten population. Right? In America, it is the industry workers who's been laid off by the new technological wave, and in France, people of rural France and to an extent, the same way here in Hungary as well. In Israeli, I suppose the Haredi has some major political voice in the right-wing coalition as we speak. So, to what extent are is their political power being exercised?
Yeah, they use it to the fullest. The Haredi population, that is a growing part of the Israeli population in large, is taking advantage of its electoral power in order to make alliance with the right wing, that is naturally more naturally accepts the religion in public life more than the left wing. So they make alliances with the right wing, and they use their political power to gain benefits to their own to their own community. The exemption from the military, from drafting into the military. As I said, almost most Jewish youngsters have to be drafted. No, it's mandatory to get drafted to the military in Israel, except for the Haredi, who the excuse is that they have to study religious studies, and therefore they should not be bothered with military service. But military service, is in a way is a sacrifice. People make sacrifices few of their years in order, and sometimes they can be. Israel is not at peace with its neighbors, so sometimes they have to not only work very hard and train, but also get injured or even get killed in this conflict. And so definitely they danger their future, whereas the Haredi do not. So that also by itself creates a lot of discontent in the Israeli society, and many disputes and conflicts around this issue. And since the Haredi community is growing in numbers, that phenomena is more more concerning, more evident, and this dispute becoming larger as time goes by.
Mhm. I think the greatest challenge to liberalism today is this idea by people who are anti-liberal that says that liberalism is not value neutral, but it professes a set of values of its own. And I'm sure the rhetoric is the same in Israel as in America, that liberals are elites who seeks to control all facets of the states of society, and wishes to exclude certain elements that they deem to be illiberal. And that brings me to how, contrary to the idea of democracy, liberalism is not a popular one. Because if you look at, say, countries like North Korea and Iran, they can still say that they profess democracy and they respect democracy. But within the West, there is a growing, I guess, disregard and even contempt for liberalism that shows the degree of popularity those two ideas are. So, to what extent can you, convince, say, someone of the Haredi belief system that liberalism is just as good for yourself as well as for them?
I would, first of all, I don't know if I can, but if I, what I would try to use is the arguments that because all people were born equal, they should have equal opportunity in the public life. And when they form together a society that lives together and puts upon itself some rules and regulations on how a society would live together, and who will provide, the security, and who will provide the access to prosperity, and what are the opportunities that each person gets, then there should be an effort on one hand not to limit anybody, to give freedom to everybody to exercise their own, and not to have one person have better better opportunities than others, as long as the society dictates it. The society should not allow one sector more opportunities than another from at the starting gate. Now, this by itself is a value, okay, that I believe in, but and I think in my opinion it makes sense. Maybe to others it does not. I mean, so that's why we do not have liberalism in every corner of the world, and that's why we have issues. When we had societal issues all over the world, and over history, from the monarchy to socialism and communism and democracy of different kinds, and populism, and so this is not a new discussion that we are having, and not unique to Israel. But in Israel, the issue of equality, and specifically because you risk your life, your life in the military, or something, then sometimes the mothers say, "Why should I send my son or daughter to the military and have their risk their lives when my neighbor does not?" So this touches on very human sentiment that is very basic, and comes into play specifically in the Israeli reality.
So another challenge to liberalism recently comes from the Israeli political theorist Yoram Hazony, who's been making headwaves in America too, and also I think in Hungary. I believe he used to work for Netanyahu, and in his view, liberalism is incompatible with what he sees as nationalism, as in one's loyalty to the nation state. And he would say that look at Tel Aviv and look at Jerusalem. Tel Aviv is it's Israeli, but it's just like any other city, like New York or Paris and so on, and Tokyo, I suppose. Whereas Jerusalem is deeply Israeli to its core, and I suppose. And he believes that liberalism means that your loyalty is to a set of ideas rather than to the nation state itself. So, how do you suppose liberalism can be compatible to nationalism?
Well, we've seen where nationalism has taken us in society, in the world. I mean, when countries are more nationalistic, they have disputes, they have wars. We've gotten to human tragedies of huge huge catastrophes by nationalism. So the fact that he separates nationalism from liberalism, and thinks that we lose the uniqueness because if we're more liberal, in my mind, maybe it's a benefit. Maybe it's good that we lose the uniqueness, because we can have the world society can live more peacefully if we are less nationalistic. We shouldn't disrespect our past and history and religion, and we maybe should be proud of it, but we should not allow it to take over our humanity.
So finally, I would like you to say a few words about your organization, Blue White Future.
So Blue White Future was founded in 2009 with the idea of advancing a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and so Israel can become the democratic home of the Jewish people. And as the threats to the Israeli democracy have become larger, We have also taken this particular subject of the Israeli democracy as part of our agenda. And in the last year, since those protests started in 2023, Blue White Future became the home, or the organization that actually hosts the many groups and initiatives who are active in this massive protest that I think is definitely unprecedented in Israel, and maybe even worldwide is become a symbol, and this resistance to the judicial overhaul has taken many faces. There's the demonstrations, and there are marches, and there are legal challenges, and there are petitions, and to the point that some of the Israeli elite units, reservists in the Israeli elite units, decided to stop their volunteerism, to stop volunteering to the military, high-tech people, and so forth. So there have been many players and many ways in which this resistance has taken place, to the resistance of the government, and specifically to the judicial overhaul, to the judicial reform. And Blue White Future is the organization that gives everybody the service. Okay, it gives, we provide the logistical service for the protests and demonstrations. We provide legal service to the different groups and to the people who get arrested, and to the petitions to the Supreme Court. We provide financial assistance. We provide PR services. We provide synchronization and coordination among the different groups. So it has become in the last year a very active and very, I'd say, important organization in the Israeli civil society.
On that wonderful note, thank you very much, Orni Petruschka of Blue White Future, for joining this program.
Thank you very much.